Another myth, widely shared in Western literature, but also in Chinese literature, is that China has been historically isolated from the rest of the world. An isolation out of which it was brought by the Western opening of China in the 19th century, an isolation from which it broke out with the opening and reform of Deng Xiaoping's leadership after 1978 more recently. Particularly in the 19th and the 20th centuries, the scholarship on China, and indeed in China, has emphasized China's insularity vis-a-vis other cultures. There are, to be sure, both symbols and monuments of Chinese defensiveness, such as the Great Wall that we talked about, built mostly as an anti-Mongol defense perimeter during the Ming. But despite the wall and other symbols of defensiveness, for the large majority of the imperial era, China-based empires crossed often loosely defined borders routinely, and for good reasons, to engage in trade, to deal in diplomatic disputes, and to fight wars against external enemies. The Han Dynasty, for example, held trade and political relations with what are now Manchuria, Korea, and Vietnam. It sent envoys along what only much later would be called the Silk Road. Before and during the Tang periods, travelers from all over the world, including Japan, India, and West Asia, were welcomed into the realm. And with merchants and monks came new cultural and religious influences, the most important of which was Buddhism. The transformative influence of Buddhism can be compared only to that of the much later opening to the West in the 19th century, in terms of importance and impact. In the era of the Southern Sung, in the 12th and 13th centuries, the capital of Hangzhou was among the most cosmopolitan cities in the world, and it was a center of Eurasian trades in silk and spices. Under the Mongol dynasty, under the Yuan, even an Italian, Marco Polo, could famously travel, trade, and serve in the court of Kublai Khan. In the Ming dynasty, the great naval expeditions of Admiral Zheng He far surpassed in scope and ambition those of contemporary Spanish and Portuguese explorers. In the later imperial period, private Chinese entrepreneurs also moved abroad, and today the Chinese diaspora population has reached more than 40 million, mostly concentrated in Asia, in places such as Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, Burma, and the Philippines, but also in the Americas, in Europe, all homes to long and well-established populations of overseas Chinese. Beyond this, today, 750,000 citizens of the People's Republic are currently working in Africa. China's current boom is simply incomprehensible without its re-engagement with and investment from overseas Chinese entrepreneurs from all corners of the world. Efforts to cast them out, to cut them out, and to isolate China, particularly by Mao Zedong during the so-called Cultural Revolution, these would prove futile and very short-lived.